You walk into a room, the atmosphere shifts, and instantly your chest just tightens. You're immediately thinking, are they mad? Wait, did I do something wrong? Welcome to This Explainer. Today we are jumping straight into exactly why you feel so responsible for everyone else's feelings, and more importantly, how to finally break free. So let's just step right into the internal world of the chronic emotional hypervigilant. Honestly, this is such an exhausting daily reality to live in. It's that visceral experience of completely freezing the exact moment your partner falls silent. Or think about that sudden spiking panic when a friend just seems a little moody. You know, that cold drop in your stomach where your brain immediately starts scanning every recent interaction, just assuming, oh no, I'm the cause of this. Or how about hearing a simple, everyday sigh from a parent and instantly internalizing it as a direct indictment of your own personal failure? If this resonates with you, it means you possess an internal radar that literally never, ever powers down. You are constantly monitoring the environment for the subtlest shifts in tone, a tiny change in facial expression, or just the energy in the room. And it's a state of perpetual physiological stress. You are living right on the edge, constantly bracing for an emotional storm that you somehow believe it is your absolute duty to prevent.
Now, what's really fascinating here is that this hypervigilance, it's not a flaw. Actually, it is the hallmark of what clinical psychology calls an internalizer. Internalizers are just exceptionally perceptive. They are highly sensitive individuals who have this really profound instinct to connect with others. But here is the catch. In relationships, they automatically assume the burden of all the emotional heavy lifting. Think about it. You're always the one apologizing, right? You're the one desperately trying to bridge the gap after a tense moment. You are the one putting what other people need, or honestly, what you think they need, way ahead of your own fundamental well-being. It's this beautifully sensitive nature, but it's been completely hijacked by a deep-seated belief that love actually requires total self-sacrifice. You are so convinced that if you just do a little more emotional work, if you can just be a little more accommodating, you can finally stabilize all the relationships around you.
I really want to let this reality settle in your mind for a second. It is an exhausting way to live, treating every emotional shift as a crisis you absolutely must solve. Just take a deep breath and think about that for a moment. When you live this way day in and day out, that prolonged tension creates a massive allostatic load on your entire nervous system. Basically, you are burning out your own adulthood sanity. Why? Because your core identity has been entirely consumed by this impossible task of managing the unpredictable emotional states of the people you love.
And all of this sheer exhaustion, it stems from a psychological phenomenon known as emotional enmeshment. Now, enmeshment is so often confused with deep closeness or intimacy, but it is actually the exact opposite of a healthy connection. In an enmeshed dynamic, personal boundaries aren't just blurred, they are entirely erased. Two people essentially start seeking their identity and their emotional completion through each other. It's this really intense interdependency where your true, authentic self gets completely suppressed just so you can play a comfortable, predictable role for someone else. You actually begin to believe that you cannot be okay unless they are okay. If they're angry, you're anxious. If they're sad, you are devastated. Have you ever felt like you literally absorb another person's bad day like a sponge? Yeah, that is enmeshment. The space between where you end and they begin simply vanishes.
So to really understand why we do this, we have to trace the roots of that internal radar all the way back to early childhood. Psychological development happens in these distinct, really necessary phases. At around 5 months old, an infant goes through what we call hatching. This is when they finally realize they are physically separate from their caregiver. Then by 10 months, they enter the practicing phase. This is that energetic, exhilarating time of exploring their own autonomy. They're crawling away, exploring the world. But then around 18 months, reality kind of hits them. This is the rapprochement phase. The toddler suddenly realizes the world is big and scary, and they come running back needing the absolute safety and reassurance of the parent. But what happens if that parent is emotionally volatile, or fragile, or maybe completely self-preoccupied? Well, that natural developmental arc gets completely shattered. The child senses that the parent actually cannot handle their emerging individuality. So to secure the connection they desperately need just to survive, the child essentially abandons their autonomy. They enter this state of forced role compliance. They learn to suppress their own authentic needs just to keep that unstable parent calm. And this dynamic creates what is honestly a tragic, yet totally brilliant childhood survival strategy. It's the conditioning of emotional ownership. Let's break down how this happens. Step 1. The adults in the home exhibit chaotic, totally unpredictable emotional weather. They might be super loving one moment and then completely detached or raging the very next. Step 2. To feel safe in that house, the child becomes a precise human barometer. They literally learn to scan the room, predict the impending storm, and desperately appease the adult to stabilize the environment. Picture a kid just tiptoeing around the kitchen, hyper-aware, just to make sure they don't accidentally trigger an outburst before dinner. But here is the most devastating part, step 3. Over time, this defense mechanism tricks the child into a terrifying illusion. Because you were the one constantly adjusting the temperature, your developing brain actually convinced you that you caused the storm in the first place. You learn to believe that other people's negative emotions are inherently your fault, and that creates a lifelong false sense of ownership over feelings that were literally never yours to carry.
So here is the crucial point, and it's a bit of an uncomfortable truth. What we so often disguise as being nice or being a really good partner is actually a clinical behavior called overfunctioning. Overfunctioning is not driven by noble principles or pure altruism. No, it is a pure anxiety-driven reflex. When someone around you is distressed, it triggers your own profound internal tension. To calm your own anxiety, you reflexively assume control. You just step right in, to fix it, to soothe, to manage their well-being. Imagine jumping up to wash the dishes the absolute second someone else sighs heavily, just to relieve that thick tension in the room. You aren't doing it just to be helpful. You're doing it because the discomfort of letting them experience their own negative emotions is simply too terrifying for you to tolerate.
I want to pause right here. Let's take a second, because I want to ask you a very direct, very important question. Whose emotional luggage are you currently carrying right now, today? Just really think about the weight of it. Who are you carrying that for?
Okay, we really need to draw a razor-sharp, liberating distinction here between empathy and boundary erosion. Caring about someone is fundamentally completely different than taking ownership of their emotional state. Empathy, like true, healthy empathy, means you care deeply about their feelings. You offer support, you offer active listening, sure, but you strictly maintain a separate sense of self. You are a witness to their pain, you are not a sponge for it. Boundary erosion, on the other hand, that means you actually believe you are responsible for their feelings. It means you get swallowed whole by guilt when you can't magically fix their unhappiness. It means their anxiety doesn't just invoke compassion in you, it literally physically transfers into your body. Your jaw clenches, your heart starts racing, and you experience their panic as if it's your own anxiety.
If you take nothing else away from this explainer, let it be this. Empathy is connection. Emotional ownership is enmeshment. You can love someone immensely. You can be profoundly devoted to them without absorbing their psychological reality as your very own. In fact, if you constantly blur those lines, you actually destroy the exact space necessary for a healthy adult relationship to breathe and thrive. Think about it. You cannot truly connect with someone if you are busy melting into them.
So how do you know when you've actually crossed that line? Well, the clinical symptoms of severe boundary loss are painfully clear. Maybe you feel perpetually drained, just exhausted, and honestly secretly resentful after interacting with the people you love. Or maybe you become a social chameleon, constantly minimizing your own differences and saying yes to things you absolutely hate, just to appease others and avoid rocking the boat. Perhaps you experience literal physical panic if someone you love is unhappy. You might feel an agonizing sense of guilt for experiencing your own joy if someone else around you is suffering. And ultimately, you become an absolute master at anticipating and catering to the needs of literally everyone in your life, while your own soul is just starving in the background.
But there is a way out. Let's look at the ultimate cure for this sheer exhaustion. In family psychology, this concept is called differentiation of self. Now, differentiation is the mature adult capacity to maintain your emotional autonomy, your solid self, even when the environment around you is highly anxious or demanding. It means you start acting based on your own deeply held principles and logic, rather than just reacting reflexively to the emotional pressures of the group. A highly differentiated person can stay deeply, lovingly connected to a partner or a parent who is in distress without being pulled right into their emotional collapse. You essentially become this sturdy anchor, rather than a leaf just getting blown around in their storm. So, the big question. How do we actually achieve this? How do we systematically hand this heavy emotional luggage back to its rightful owner? First, step 1. Notice the anxiety. You have to pay acute attention to your body. Start recognizing the exact moment you begin absorbing another person's distress. Step 2. Stop the reaction. Just do not jump in. You need to use your internal firewall of solid self to completely halt that automatic overfunctioning reflex. Then step 3. Empathize without fixing. This one is absolutely critical. You offer them love, you listen closely, you can say, "I am so sorry you are dealing with this," but you absolutely refuse to be their safety net. And finally, step 4, tolerate the pain.
You must withstand the immense internal discomfort of allowing the people you love to actually experience the consequences and the weight of their own emotions. Because the truth is, you cannot grow their emotional muscles by constantly lifting their weights for them.
There is a really powerful principle to remember here. Love and limits are the only clear boundaries. Stop reacting. Be proactive. Listen, setting a boundary, saying no, or simply refusing to manage someone else's mood is not an act of abandonment. It's not cruelty. It is actually an act of deep, profound love, both for yourself and for them. When you finally stop reacting to their emotional coercions, you force them to encounter themselves. You give them the ultimate gift of their own autonomy, and in the process, you reclaim your own life.
Thank you for joining me on this explainer. I really want you to know that the emotional freedom you are looking for is entirely within your reach. You can start returning the luggage today, because if you finally set that heavy luggage down, if you stop carrying the crushing weight of everyone else's unmanaged emotions, what will you finally have the energy to build for yourself?